Hi, welcome to a new video, and today we're going to continue our discussion on quadratic equations, solving quadratic equations, but different from the last videos where we introduced quadratic equations and gone through the sums and products strategy. We'll go through the strategy called splitting the middle term, and this one is very useful, especially in situations, it's useful in some ways that sums and products aren't, okay? And again, all of this will be very helpful for you when you're graphing quadratic functions, okay? So very important to know how to solve quadratics. And for this method, I broke it down into 5 steps, okay? It seems like a lot, but I really broke it down into small steps, so it'll be really clear how this works, okay? But then let's begin with this example, okay? X squared minus 2x minus 8. And our first step here is using the sums and product strategy, just like we did last time, like in our last video. And we basically want to find two numbers that add up to this term, okay, the coefficient that is multiplied by x, sorry, it's not term, it's coefficient, technical names, but what is multiplied by your x, okay? And then two numbers that add up to -2 in this case and multiply to this number here, the one that doesn't have any x, any variable, okay? And there's actually a little detail here that this secret one over here plays a role in the product, but I'll get that in a further example. I just want to show the basics of this strategy before getting to a more complicated example. So, first step, finding two numbers that add up to this, multiply to this. So, in this case, we have a negative product. So we know that if we want a negative product, we need to multiply a negative number by a positive number. So we need to find two numbers, right? One negative and a positive that add up to -2 and multiply to -8. And a strategy that I like to use to do that is just identify which numbers multiply to -8. So we can, okay, so -8, we can have -8 times 1, right? We can have 8 times -1. We can also have -2 times 4, -4 times 2. These are, I think, all the ways that you can get 8 by multiplying two numbers, right? Yeah. And then we just add them. So now, instead of multiplying, we add them to see if they will give us our wanted sum. -8 plus 1 equals -7. So that's not what we wanted. 8 plus -1 is just 8 minus 1. Gives us 7 is not what we wanted. -2 plus 4 gives us 2, is not what we wanted, but the -4 plus 2 gives us -2, which is our product. So we know that the two numbers that multiply to -8 and add up to -2 are -4 and 2. Sorry, let me write them down here. So our two numbers are -4 and 2, and there we just made our first step. But different from in the sums and product strategy, we're not going to write those directly into our function, into our equation with parentheses. We could, but I'm going to explain this process first because it will be very useful in other problems. Okay, so now we just did our first step, and we can go to our second step, which is splitting the x term. Okay, so now that we have these two numbers, what do? We come back to our original function, right? And we start rewriting. We rewrite the first term, the x squared, but then instead of -2x, we're going to split it into two terms of x. So let me show you how to do this, and then I'm going to explain. We're going to split it into -4x, our first number, right, multiplied by x, plus 2x, okay? We just split this term into two. But if you look at this is not really changing the value of the expression, because -4x plus 2x will be -2x. But this is just a strategy that's useful, again, that I'm going to show you right now, to find your final answer, okay? So now we go to, okay, we write the -8. Second step done. Now grouping. Now we will decide to group two of them together. So in this case, let's pick up just the two that are beside each other. X squared minus 4x. You pick one that has x squared and one of the x's, okay? One of the x's goes on this side, one on the other. Plus, and then another group, 2x minus 8. okay? And then, third step done, then we go to factoring the parentheses. And this, we have a video about this, but basically you want to look at this parenthesis and see what you can pull out from it to, well, simplify it. You want to factor it to have some number multiplied on the outside by a certain parenthesis, which is going to be useful, like I'm going to show you. Okay, then let's go through it, and then you see how it's useful. Here, well, the process I like to do that I showed in the other video is breaking each of these numbers down into multiplied numbers. And you can see in this parenthesis you have a repeated x multiplied in both of them, so that means you can pull it out doing an opposite distributive property, leaving inside only x plus 4. And you can distribute this back to check that if you really get that. And on this side, you can, again, splitting into terms, minus 2 times 4. And here you see you have a repeated 2. Therefore, you can pull it out, and inside you actually have x minus 4. And if you realize this and this are the same binomial, the same parentheses, aren't they? And if we get back also again to the video about factoring, if these two are multiplied, how can I explain this? This is being multiplied to this and added to this being multiplied to this, but since they're the same like value being multiplied twice, we can again undistribute it, we can again factor it out and write something like x plus 2 times x minus 4. Because you see, I just did the opposite process. Remember in the other video about algebraic expansion, you can check that out, I multiplied this parenthesis by this term, right? Then by this term. And what I basically did here is realize, okay, what this means is that I multiplied the parenthesis by this term and multiplied the parenthesis by this term, so I can just do the opposite process. Instead of multiplying it in, I can bring it outside and make a new parenthesis x plus 2 with each of these, and this way get the factored, fully factored form of our quadratic. Okay? And this, in this specific example, you could have skipped a bunch of these steps and went direct to your sum, because when you find the two numbers that add up to the middle term, to the coefficient of x, and multiply to this negative 8 here, you can just write them out beside x's, like this, you see? And it's exactly the same thing we got here. But right now I'm going to show you an example where that does not work, where simply sums and products does not work, and you'll have to do something exactly like this, okay? So this is just for you to get familiar with the process, but now I'm going to show an example where it is extremely useful, and it's basically the only way, except if you do quadratic equation. Quadratic equation always works for factoring, but I don't know, I prefer using other methods because, I don't know, memorizing the quadratic equation, and there's a lot of places to make mistakes. I don't know, it's up to your decision which methods you think are better, okay?